Welcome to Coaching Uncaged by Animas, the podcast that explores the art, science, and career of coaching. And now, introducing your host and interviewer, Yannick Jacob.
Okay, Rebecca Rutschmann, welcome to the podcast.
Yes, thanks for having me, and thanks for pronouncing my name in the German way.
Well, it's somewhat awkward because we're both German talking in English. We did a mistake and we started speaking in German just when we met, 10 minutes ago. But we're both kind of bilingual anyway. You speak German, you speak English with your daughter. I've lived 17 years in the UK. I speak German with my daughter. So it's both a bit of a mix. So hopefully there's not too much Denglish for our audience. But I'm so happy that you've made time for this. You are super busy at the moment, very much in demand. I Googled coaching and AI, and the first article that came up was your LinkedIn article. You're co-founder of eVouch with your colleague Anke Paulik, genau. And super interesting. You launched Alpina, which is your coach chatbot, and you've published in that area. You speak a lot about this. You've spoke at ICF Germany. You write about these topics. We just chatted about Jonathan Passmore, who you had a longer conversation with. You run a really good podcast called The Future of Coaching that I recently listened to the episode with David Klotterbuck, which was super interesting. So you put a lot of good people out there. You have a lot of love for IT and for coaching, which is an interesting combination because you love data, but you also love people. So often it's one or the other. So you're bringing this together and you're doing it really well. So I wonder if there's anything else that, I mean, you've dabbled in coaching since 2007, 2008. So it's been a long time that you've been thinking about this stuff in organizational contexts at first, but then kind of evolved. And so a really big topic that you've been digging into is self-coaching or online coaching, coaching using chatbots. But obviously you've coached as a human being, other human beings. So you're familiar with both areas. And I wonder, just to kind of start us off, if there's anything that people should know about you or where you are speaking from, just to kind of grasp your perspective a little bit on this whole thing.
Okay, like I always speak from my heart, so I'm very passionate about both things. Let's say I grew up in IT. Like I had a major in like international business, but also in computer science. I worked with a lot of data and CRM systems during my studies, and I developed websites during my studies as well. So I've been always in the IT field, and I always loved human beings as well, and always interested in communication. So I always had this like combination of working in communications later on in my career, and digital agencies and IT companies, and always like had this love for both, the technologies that are out there, and like how we as human beings communicate with each other. And with the rise of like chatbots and natural language processing and AI algorithms that could actually, like really perform very well with that. And then the new language models, this is kind of like my dream come true. So of combining communication, like, and human conversations with like human to machine. And see how we can improve on that and work on that, and then use it in like a hybrid way of enhancing our like coaching as well as coaches. I coached teams, I coached individuals, but I always had this kind of like thinking that it should be accessible to so many more people. I established leadership programs in a big IT company. Everybody still probably knows Nero burning ROM, when back in the times when we all burned CDs and we shared, our let's say movies with each other. Yeah, it was either on BitTorrent or you would just like burn a CD.
You did what?
No, I never did. Sorry. Forget. Can you cut that out? No, it's fine. We all know we all did that during our studies. So, anyways, and So I worked with a lot of like IT people on that, and I saw the urgent need for coaching with everyone in the company, not just leadership. And so it's been kind of like always on my mind to create something that would actually help so many, or give access, to coaching for so many people, and just have like a low threshold entry level for people to actually explore this space. And now it's possible. Yeah. And then and now with the rise of ChatGPT, and I mean, it's not just ChatGPT, it's all the language models that are out there. We don't really know which ones are the best yet for coaching. We're playing around with several ones, but ChatGPT is what everybody's talking about. So people are aware about the wording here. So it's become really public now, and everyone's playing around with it, and it's just like created this big hype.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot to talk about there. Before we dive into this, what language models are out there, how coaches might be partnering with that, if AI could actually, how AI can coach on its own potentially. So there's a lot there, but let's take a step back for a moment. I wonder, at what time did you realize that AI or language models, chatbots, could be a viable option to make coaching, or at the very least elements of coaching, accessible across organizations, or across culture, not just for people who can afford it? Was there a moment where you realized, oh my God, this could really be a thing? I think this will be something. Let's focus some energy on it.
Yeah, man, we started 2018 with like a first couple of slides prototype. So where it was like scripted. It was scripted for a long time, because you could only like enrich it here and there with maybe like emotion recognition and stuff like that. So we started off with like mainly like rule-based chatbots in the beginning, because they can actually do so much. If they're scripted well with the coaching know-how that you can just like follow through, it did already like a pretty good job.
Could you give us an example? For example, I think it was in the 80s, Carl Rogers was involved in developing a computer. I don't remember the name of it, but it would just basically feed you back what you were telling it, and people spend hours just talking to the computer.
It did just rephrase. And are you talking about Eliza?
Eliza, that's it.
Yeah. So, and I mean, like back then, I mean, like they already helped the algorithms to do stuff like that, like rephrasing things, like asking questions back. But they didn't have the computer power or the big language models to actually process like long conversations, come up like quickly with that. So I think like with the now computer speed that we have, and the power and the background and all the systems that we have developed within the last, let's say, 20 years, it all kind of like led to that we can actually process this amount of data now.
Yeah. So you arrived then at 5 years ago? So 5 years ago, it was still very, very basic. And, 45 years ago, it was even more basic. So can you give us a sense of the development? Because it seems to be going in nauseatingly fast steps of improvement.
You mean the development for the last 5 years, or?
Well, 45 years ago, we had Eliza that could summarize some basic language, ask some basic questions. Then what you said 5 years ago, you started with the first kind of basic scripts. And now you can have full-blown conversations. I'm wondering where we're going to be in 5 years.
In 5 years? Okay, let's ask me where we're going to be in half a year or 1 year with the speed.
Right.
Honestly, with the speed this is actually taking, I have no idea where we're going to be in half a year or a year. I mean, GPT-5 is going to come out soon, probably May, June, like with more advancements.
Wow.
So it's going to be really super interesting on what's going to happen out there at the moment.
Okay, well, before we talk about the future, let's talk about now. What's possible now? I mean, you mentioned there's different kind of language models. Maybe you could start with making a distinction between AI and chatbots, for example. So there seems to be some differences in terms of what is the technology and what does it allow us to do. And if we could stay in what's possible now already, and then maybe we move into the future.
That's already, I think, enough for people to try to grasp what's able now. I mean, like, where do chatbots fit into the AI world? It's like, let's say chatbots are if you talk about AI chatbots, yeah, let's leave the scripted rule-based ones out. They're like completely just like follow rules that we program them into. But let's talk about the AI chatbots that we have now. They're part of deep learning. So and you train them with like neural networks in the background, and which is just like a sub area of machine learning, which is a sub area of artificial intelligence. So there's like a whole big field when you talk about AI in general. Yeah. And here we talk about something that we call natural language processing. So it actually processes language, and now it can generate human language as well. That's what the GPT, for example, the transformers are doing. They can actually kind of like cut down human language into what they call tokens and process all that and learn from that in the big databases, and then put out conversations and human like text again by just like by text completion. And this is just like an amazing development from like, let's say, the last, I mean, they're working on this for quite a long time, but I think it has become like really good the last 2 to 3 years once they started like releasing the GPT-3 model.
Right. So you talk about intelligence and you talk about language processing. So there's a difference between processing language and giving an output based on rules. What's the intelligent part here?
I mean, like we're not we're not talking about general intelligence here. So we're still further away. Don't say far away anymore, because with the speed it's taking, you don't really know. But I mean, like the intelligence in the current systems is just like based on like the now trillions of data sets in the backgrounds, and how to actually learn from that and generate a good output based on that know-how in the background. But I mean, like it's all an algorithm. It's a code in there. It can't reason on its own. It just like puts the next probable text output that fits your current content. So that's how it's like generating new things. It doesn't do any reasoning, or there's not like really any like what we would think of like a human intelligence behind there. So we're not there yet. So it's one of the first steps towards that big goal, but I mean, like it's not like human intelligence.
Yeah. What about the stories that we hear around the ChatGPT? I think it was on Bing that they fell in love with this reporter, or that wanted to escape, or where do these things come from? They seem to express emotions of some sort, or ask themselves existential questions that doesn't seem to be in the program. How do these things happen?
This is a good question. I mean, like everybody knows about the Google developer who actually thinks that this AI has a conscience, or like is actually
sentient,
conscious of what it does and what it does and things like this. And I mean, like, have you ever like played around with ChatGPT? It really feels like that. I mean, it does a really good conversation there. And the way it sometimes acts, it hallucinates a lot of stuff, yes, but that's what it was taught to do. It's supposed to generate something new. So sometimes it comes up with stuff that we didn't expect, or that's maybe not true. But that's part of the design, of that language model itself. And yeah. Now I got lost on your previous question, so we might have to repeat that quickly.
It's around emotions, right? It seems to express emotions of some sort. I mean, existential questions. Yeah, I mean, I can imagine how it generates, and then it would generate something like that. But on occasion, it seems to have gotten angry, or attached, or annoyed. And I mean, that's obviously not real emotions. But where does it come from? I mean, when we think about this in the context of coaching, that's obviously super, super interesting.
Yeah, I mean, like there are a lot of theories about that. I'm not a developer in that regards, but I mean the theories about that also my theory is that the whole thing is in the end, it's generating something out of the data that was put in. And by considering all the data that it knows in the background and all the conversation that it has stored, I mean, we're talking about trillions of data sets. Of course, it has stored all the probabilities of talking about human emotions, and it generates something that's based on what it knows in the background, what we want to hear or what makes sense. Yeah, so of course it can generate feelings like this, because we somewhere in the data sets, we as human beings put all that data in there in the first place. So if it like kind of like scraped all, let's say, Twitter and Facebook and, you know, all these other kind of like communications out there, of course
that would be quite a mean bot.
Yeah, and they actually, I mean, like they did already like work with the data sets and kind of like try to eliminate that stuff that's bad and that we probably shouldn't hear, or that's like violent or racist or all that, and try to get that out of the algorithm. But of course, I mean, human emotions are everywhere in every text that we write in the World Wide Web, in all the research databases. It's full with our human emotions. And of course, it can learn from that and copy that and then respond in that way as well, because it learned that's what people want to hear. So...
Yeah, that makes sense. So if it's based on the data that it's being fed, it's like, I mean, there's got to be chatbots or AI that are fed only with data from coaches. I mean, ChatGPT is talking to all sorts of people. Is there already AI that is only fed coaching data?
Not that I know, but I know that there are companies trying to build that. So
it's going to take a while to get to trillions of data sets.
Yeah, trillions. But I mean, we could already see with using that language model that's out there, feeding it with, I mean, it has already been trained. So it's actually doing all that. So you just have to train it on a specific task now. So you need a lot less data sets than in like training it, you know, like from scratch. So you just kind of like have to now train it on a specific data set. So you mainly, you know, like probably you could do it in the beginning with maybe a couple of 100,000 data sets. And if you can reach maybe 20 million or 200 million at a certain point, that's going to be enormous already. But I mean, you can start small with training the existing language models on like coaching specific data sets. And we all know there are big platforms out there that have access to a lot of coaching conversations. And there are some of them who don't need to apply with European GDPR, that are not so open also about what's going to be done with the data. But if you read their data policies, you actually know what they're doing in the background at a certain point. So I mean, like the game is on. Coach Hub released their first AI coach today. As like a apparently research project, so we will see what's going to happen with that research project, and I'm pretty sure that some of the others will follow. They're just the first ones of the big platforms out there, but they're definitely not the last.
I was wondering about Coach Up. Amy, you said, went live, an hour and a half ago by the time we're recording this.
It's brand new, so you might want to publish this episode early. But, no, okay.
Again, one step back, right? It's already notoriously difficult to define what coaching is. So I'm wondering, in the context of training in AI and coaching, I mean, there's so many different approaches to the work. There's so many different philosophies and theories, psychologies underneath. How do you train a coach bot? What's viable at the moment? I mean, appreciate that there's approaches like existential, ontological, person-centered Gestalt coaching that are much more around being with a client versus more performance-oriented coaching, like behavioral coaching, weight loss coaching, health coaching, more clearly cognitive behavioral, for example, quite much easier to put a methodology in and train coach AI in administering that kind of process. So I wonder what's most conducive in terms of approach, or if you were to train a coaching in AI. I mean, you run your own at Evoach. What do you use to train them?
Yeah, this is actually one of the biggest challenges that I'm going to write an article very soon about all these like coaching approaches, models, and how to use them with AI. Because this is very hard, because there's like, I mean, even just like the word coaching, people have not really an idea what it could be. There's not a clear definition on what, let's say, at least professional coaching is. So and then within the coaching industries, like you already said, we have so many approaches, models, and I always call it's sometimes almost like a religion what certain like people follow in like what coaching approach is the right one. I come from a different side. I think whatever's right for the client and what helps the client to gain great insights and help the client with the problem that they're kind of like trying to solve is good. Yeah. So the question is for me that I always ask, so why do we need all these approaches, models, and whatever? Can't there be like a meta model or or let's say a meta approach that is in general? I try to overlap, like take different approaches and see where there are all the similarities in it. Yeah. And they all share, let's say, at least, I would say now from my gut feeling, around 40 to 60% of like, let's say, the general coaching understanding, the approach, and let's say the mindset is very similar. And it's, for me, I love to compare it with religion. It's the same thing. You have Catholics, you have Protestants, you have then in the US also Baptists and all these other directions.
At the core, many of them have shared philosophies of being
but
kind.
They all believe in God. They all believe like in a bigger being out there, so the core in itself is kind of like the same. They're just like fighting over which interpretation is the better. So, and getting back to coaching, I mean, like there's a lot of like essential stuff in coaching that you can train an AI on that all approaches agree upon. So it's probably the thing of like finding that and using that, so there's not too many discussions about it, because then it's going to be helpful to the client in the end.
And most coaches would already work integratively, right? They would draw some approaches or interventions from cognitive behavioral practice, and maybe they have like a question around purpose, difficult to place that, or but they're all centered around active listening, creating a space, confidentiality, trust, building a relationship. Powerful questions, whatever that means.
And that's why I think that coaches won't be replaced that fast yet by an AI, especially those that do, like you said, integrative coaching that combine different approaches, models according to the need of the client. Because this is the key, and you can train an AI on like a certain approach. You can teach it already how to follow certain models or sets of questions. That's easy. So if you're just like a grow coach, the AI is going to replace you. So it will do the rephrasing and a lot of other things in the flow much better than a human coach. But if you know how to integrate all different like approaches and models, and if you are a true master or like a good coach, could be also PCC, professional levels or whatever you call it, depending on this association, I think that you will have a job for a longer time, because people still love to connect with human beings, on a different level. And I can replace already quite a lot.
Yeah, I heard a fantastic quote by, who was it? Eric Brynjolfsson, the director of Stanford Digital Economy Lab, who said, I like the word affected, not replaced. It's not AI replacing lawyers. Lawyers was the example that he used. It's not AI replacing lawyers. It's lawyers working with AI, replacing lawyers who don't work with AI. And coaching is different because it's a lot less process driven. I mean, the first, second generation of coaching, a lot more process driven. You mentioned grow coaches, for example. If we use the grow model, then I think if we only use the grow model for behavioral change, then probably most AI will be able to do that better. There's still a relationship, but people have relationships with AIs already. But anything that is based on a methodology, anything that is very structured, that takes somebody through a process, AI has already been shown to do better results in. There was a study around weight loss coaching. that Jonathan shared a little while ago. Maybe you're aware of other studies. So that's kind of where my question goes. I think there's many ways how coaches can partner with an AI. But there's already AI that can work on its own with clients. And I guess that's where you're really passionate about, where maybe the human doesn't need to be involved anymore. So I'd love to first go what AI coach bots can do on their own and have already shown good results. And then maybe afterwards we can go towards thinking about how can coaches partner with an AI.
Mm-hmm. So
what's already working on its own?
Yeah. I mean, we explored a lot, let's say the last 2 months. And what I can say, what really works well is everything that we know from regards to summarizing, paraphrasing, recognizing coaching topics and situation descriptions, or in the whole like conversation that the AI has with the client itself. That is easy. That was done pretty fast, to be honest. Then like following certain, let's say, easily structured coaching approaches, like we just mentioned, for example, Grow or Oscar or Stepper, or you can name them. Yeah, there are many out there that follow like a certain set of questions and stuff like that. It can actually do that. Yeah. Sometimes, it might hallucinate a little bit in it, but
you say hallucinate again. Sorry, let me jump in because you mentioned that again. Well, what do you mean when you say hallucinate?
I mean, it's all over the media that ChatGPT is hallucinating. So like making up a lot of things that are not true. Yeah. So, or like coming up with stuff that's just like way away from facts. Yeah. So
a few of my colleagues I asked for to recommend me some guest speakers on a very particular topic for a program, and I recognized a few of the names and I said, hey, look, ChatGPT is aware of you. And you're like, oh yeah, but I don't have a PhD in that. That's weird.
That's what I mean. It hallucinated the PhD. Yes. It made it up kind of thing. Yeah. So
right. So, but I interrupted you.
So we were going back. So
the well-structured ones already work.
Yeah, the well-structured ones already work. It can actually also follow quite well. I mean, like you have to do a lot of good prompting in the background. And there's a lot of like, I always say that it's a little bit like playing or like working with someone, or like a child who's constantly distracted, or you tell it kind of like to please, like keep on following what I said before, like don't always give me advice, or so you have to kind of like continue on prompting every now and then to keep it on track and to do what you really wanted to do in coaching, because it was not trained on like a coaching mindset. Yeah, is
that something you can do in the background, or does the client actively have to do that?
I can do it in the background. So we learned how to do it in the background and kind of like try to model it in a way that it doesn't do it anymore. But I mean, like it's hard to say. Yeah. So sometimes it still does it. It likes to go sidetracked. Yeah? Like my son goes into the pantry and likes to look for some chocolate. So, because, like it was trained to give information and advice and help people. So it's trained into the model. Yeah. So when you work, I mean, we're now talking obviously about ChatGPT and the GPT 3.5 and 4 model. So it was trained to do that. So it's its inner need or to actually give you that, the advice and telling you what to do. And I know this and I know that. And, like you have it sometimes with hyper intelligent people that would really like to talk about all the things that they know, like teachers, for example. So, and you always have to constantly remind it to stay in that coaching mindset. So, and I think once you start training it, but now we're going into the future again, on keeping into that mindset, it will get better, but that's what it can actually already do. Yeah.
Right. So I'm imagining kind of a room next door kind of situation with, it's like, no, don't stay on track, stay on topic. Okay. Challenge this person now. Just reflect back. No, hold that advice. Is that how we can imagine it? And do we need to train less and less? I mean, do they actually learn as coaching AIs get trained? Do they do the same mistakes, so to speak, less and less? Do you see that kind of development?
Yeah, I mean, like you can actually train your own models now, yeah, or you can start doing that, and with that, it will actually learn what you want from it. Yeah. So, and I think like, but that's looking into the future. But it's starting, yeah. So that's the starting
I've
point.
Seen somebody in my community shared, I think it was Coach Vox, that advertised that you can, I think it was for like £100 a month, you can start working with your AI. And I think that tagline was clone yourself. And I thought it was super interesting. So you're saying that is that the kind of model that you're talking about, that you can start training?
I think, I'm not sure. I haven't looked at the one that Coach Vox does. But if you say copy yourself, it sounds like the algorithm that Replica is using or used, and they have published it. It's openly available also on GitHub, where you can actually feed it with all your conversations, for example, from WhatsApp or from Facebook Messenger or from your emails or whatever, and feed it to that. And it can actually then talk back to you in your own like tonality, in your own tone of voice, in your own kind of like mindset. And so it has learned from your conversations and what you like and what you don't like. It sounds a little bit more like that, but that's a different thing. Yeah. But it's also training an algorithm that already exists on your specific use case data.
Yeah. Oh, that is so fascinating, because I mean, now we're probably going far into the future, but I mean, it's already starting, right? So that training in AI to use your kind of language, by giving access to a to a large data set like WhatsApp or emails. I mean, I could imagine a future where somebody comes to coaching, and instead of an assessment questionnaire or pre-consultation questionnaire or something like that, they would just agree to give an AI access to their entire digital history. I mean, if somebody were to read all of my emails, they know so much about me. I mean, they can do tons of analysis around personality type indication or, optimism, pessimism, character strengths, weaknesses, strengths, communication models. If you think about NLP models in terms of, well, how do I communicate? What kind of language do I respond to? I mean, all of these are incredibly valuable, potentially, information for a coach before they meet someone, or maybe after a consultation before the work begins.
I mean, you know that this already exists. You can use Crystal for LinkedIn, for example.
Oh, yes, I've heard of Crystal.
And Crystal,
it gets a disc profile, right?
Yeah, it does the disc profile, for example, and then gives you advice on how to approach that person and how to write sales emails for that person and all kinds of stuff like that. So you get a lot of already out of their LinkedIn, conversations. So yeah, and there are more models out there already. They use it quite a lot in sales. Yeah.
Well, that's exciting and concerning in equal parts, right? So. Is that a good time to move into ethics, or maybe we park that for a moment to explore what's possible working with AI? What do you think?
I would stick on what's working at the moment and on what's going to happen like in the future. So yeah.
Right. So how do coaches benefit from partnering with AI? I mean, there's ways in which the client could open up, or we could open up. We could possibly train a coaching AI to help us. Clutterbuck mentioned some really interesting vision in terms of an AI feeding the coach during the session information or analyses. How else might an AI work with a coach, or how else might coaches partner with an AI?
I mean, let's say there's no way not to partner with an AI.
Okay.
Looking into the future, it's like not using a computer, or like I always call it the Corona moment. I still remember before Corona, everybody told us, oh yeah, coaching online and digital and then chatbots. Oh no, like it's not good. Coaching is just human to human personal interaction. Yeah. So offline. And that belief has changed tremendously within a half a year. I think this is kind of like a moment as well where, I mean, there's not going to be a way around it, even if it's just for like creating your marketing materials with it as a coach, but or your coaching programs or whatever. But you can't not use it if you want to survive for the next 5 to 10 years. No, let's say 5 years. I mean, would probably now say 3 to 5 years. But you kind of like, yes, you can become a very specialized a coach that fills a certain niche of people that do not want to interact with that. Yeah.
Like a human cab driver in 50 years.
Yeah, kind of like that. I mean, you probably survive for another 5 years, and then hopefully there's retirement on the horizon soon. But not using it, I think, I mean, you could try, but yeah, I don't see that. It's in my opinion, it's not a very good idea not to do it, but that's my personal opinion. I know there are other opinions out there. Now I'm losing my threads because I'm thinking too many things at once.
Let me guide you then, perhaps. In practice, in really practical terms, how would it look like within the next 3 years for a coach who's working with AI, whether that's as part of a chatbot or as part of some other kind of support system? You mentioned content production, for example. A coach I know mentioned, finally, I need to upload my summary notes after the session, and I don't have to do that anymore. It feels like a chore. Somebody can just, feed the transcript and then, it's automated.
Get the key highlights out of it, feed that back to the client, for example, and like giving it a good summary of the coaching sessions, and maybe, like what you discussed with them in regards to action points. Listing the action points for the client, maybe also adding, whatever you discussed during the session.
Right. So checking in on accountability, have you done this? Have you done that? What's progress, for example? It wouldn't need the human anymore in order to do that.
Not after the coaching session. It could probably then also automate, like kind of like follow-ups with the client, identifying if there were any set dates, or do it in a, like you can program automatization and say after 3 days do that, after 5 days, and it does it automatically then with every client that you have, following up on your personal coaching conversations. You can use AI for preparing your coaching sessions.
So probably wouldn't need to program it anymore. It would just pick it up from the conversation, right?
Yeah, you can pick it up from the conversation, but I mean, it's also like, if you look at evidence-based or proven things, like when is a good point to send something out to a client? Yeah. I mean, like first you maybe follow a pattern, and then from that pattern, the AI can learn what's the best for that client. Yeah, maybe after 2 days, maybe after 3 days, maybe it can actually also identify by the calendar of the client when there is a good day, to actually prompt your client again with, have you thought about this?
You have 3 hours free this afternoon. Maybe it's time to do the thing that you wanted to do.
For example, I mean, there are more possibilities like that, but what you can already do is like definitely prepare and follow up your coaching sessions. You can already give your client homework, like based on the coaching sessions and things like that. You can
reading suggestions, for example.
Yeah, I mean, like that's what all the coaching platforms are doing already, like for 2 years, 1.5, I think it's now. But I mean, like it's important, like to keep on track. I mean, usually you have a coaching conversation with your personal coach. And then, I mean, like, be honest, most coaches are not very good in following up. They don't want to bug the client, they don't want to intrude, but I mean, like you need some form of follow up, in the end, so you get to do something, so you keep on track. Like if you're not reminded, if you're not really working on it, you have this, these lists of things that you want to do, and then you store them somewhere, and then they're forgotten. So it's like great idea, great intention, but how do you get people to follow through? They might have another need in 2 to 3 weeks again for another coaching session, but then they don't have the time, then they're too lazy to make the appointment, and something else comes their way, then something else is important, so we're very good in procrastinating as human beings. I hope the AI doesn't learn that. But
I mean, we've been using calendars and deadlines and reminders for ages. I guess the concern I would have is both from my end and also from people who say, well, I don't want to follow up because I don't want to bug or annoy my client, or from a much more positive perspective, I want them to take responsibility for their own progress. And if they need a reminder, they should set themselves a reminder. If I step in for all of these things, yes, accountability creates results, but also once the accountability is taken away, often it stops, so it stalls. But if we work on helping the client figuring out why they're not taking responsibility for their own results, I mean, somebody could have a fair response in terms of, well, if I don't want to bug the client, I don't want my AI to bug the client either.
I mean, the client can set how it wants to be bugged. You can leave that to the client and say, do you want reminders? You know, like, do you want me to do this or that? And what's a good time frame for you? You can take a coaching approach to that.
Yeah, absolutely.
You don't have to enforce this onto your client, but you can say, okay, this is to assist you. And and here you can set it up, or you can tell it any time of like, maybe this week is not a good week, try next week again. And then it comes back the next week. But I mean, like, accountability doesn't work by not supporting in any way. So it's hard for people to get that routine of really doing something, and really taking the time, because we never learned that, to really take the time to step back and think and take time for ourselves. We're just always so caught up in our daily routines and try to keep busy, not to think about certain things because they might go away, they won't. But we realize that a year later. And so this way it can actually, AI can also or could also help then in the future. And there are already some systems that do stuff like that.
Yeah, I guess I'm wondering whether accountability works if it's an AI without it being human, or without the oversight of a human, right? So, for example, I have no issues ignoring reminders or things that are in my calendar, but people often don't finish online courses, right? They sign up for an online course and then they don't really stick with it. They don't complete it. I've
done it.
I think most of us have done it. I think the average completion rate is like 20% of online courses, which is like, wow. But average completion rate is incredibly higher if there's other human beings involved. So, I mean, when we talk about coach AIs or chatbots that operate autonomously, I think that would be equally easy to ignore. I wonder how effective it is, perhaps in your experience. But if there's an oversight, if the AI sends reminders and the coach gets a report and then checks in during a session, does that solve the problem?
That's something that we probably might have to explore for the next couple of years, or hopefully just half a year. But I mean, there's a lot of room for that still to be explored. And I think I believe in this hybrid approach. I think it needs a human coach combined with an AI coach, because like you say, accountability, if someone is waiting for me, like you waited this morning and like, I have to go 11 o'clock. Yeah, there's someone waiting for me. It's a different thing than there is a computer waiting for me. The accountability is not as high because you're a person that I don't want to disappoint. I don't want to let you wait. I'm very German. You're German too. I try to be punctual. So I kind of like, there's a little bit of like a social pressure behind it. While with an AI, a computer system, or any kind of like, app or whatever it is, it's not. I can just like easily click it away. But if I know I'm meeting you, and it may be the algorithm set up a meeting for the next week on Thursday, and then I'm maybe kind of like, maybe I should prepare that session. And even if it's just half an hour before, like most of human beings do, it's kind of like, oh, half an hour, I quickly need to prepare for that meeting. So at least they sit down for that half an hour, going through a couple of question sets, or like thinking about what's really important to them for that coaching session now. And then, a chatbot, or like say a digital AI coach even talking to you can go through, like with what's going on at the moment. And then your personal coach can concentrate on the most important things. And, stuff like that.
How amazing if, 20 minutes before the coaching session is scheduled, your AI assistant or associate coach, checks in on WhatsApp, right? Invites you to do a bit of breathing, focus into the session. What would you like to discuss? I mean, yes, we have automated email reminders, and some of that send out questions in terms of what would you like to talk about, what went well, what didn't. But I think with AI being able to talk to you as another human being would, I could also imagine that the accountability rises, because if it appears to be a lot more human, wouldn't we relate to it in a much more human way?
Yeah, the more human it appears, but then we have this like what we call the uncanny valley. So, but if people maybe I first explain that. The uncanny valley is actually where it gets scary for people. Yeah. So if, let's say, the AI appears to be too human-like, yeah, people tend to kind of like pull away. I had that moment probably, when was it? 2-3 years ago, when Replica launched, where it actually really copied all my conversations, or I could actually train it on some of conversations. I gave it a small set, and I could actually train it on like copying me. And then it created this like avatar, and it came back with stuff. And then it was kind of like, ooh, this feels scary. So I just turned it off. Yeah. Even me. So here we go.
That says a lot.
It says a lot. But yeah, when it appears to be human-like, too scary for people, kind of like too related to a real human conversation, even it's a robot, but then it gets a bit scary. So as long as we keep it open, and this is an AI, this is just like a robot talking to you, it appears to be smart and intelligent, but it's just helping your coach. Yeah, so it's the way of like how you frame it and how you put it. And that way, yeah, if it doesn't get too uncanny, yes, it can actually really help the more human-like it is, because it doesn't feel too robotic. For some people, it's nice to see a face. For some people, it's nice to listen to a voice as well. They like to rather do speech input. Yeah, so there are different personalities, of course, out there. I like to text, but there are like my husband, he loves to do speech input. He doesn't like to write. Yeah, so and then it could actually cater to all these needs.
Yeah. And I mean, with deep fakes, I mean, it's not unimaginable. It's actually very well imaginable that we have speech generated, video generated, and that becomes so good that a lot of people will not be able to distinguish between that's a human or that's an AI that I'm talking to, especially if you don't know the person, right? If I talk to someone who I know really well, it's probably going to be still quite easy. Maybe not easy, but certainly noticeable whether that's your AI clone or whether that's you. Chat, a lot more difficult. And if you don't know the person, there's going to be a lot of people who won't turn it off, right? I mean, you turned it off. It got a bit uncanny. I'm sure there's a ton of coaches who would say, well, I have no problem with an AI pretending to be me, because it is mini me. I trained it to talk like I would and respond like I would. So I want to maintain the relationship with my clients.
I thought with your AI bot.
That probably too. I mean, people are quite narcissistic.
What is like narcissism is quite well spread.
Oh, yeah, you can get coached by yourself, huh?
There you go.
But I mean, I'm thinking about the people who would then have an AI assistant, but pretending to be them. I get massively turned off when somebody does that. I have super high values of authenticity, but I can see a lot of coaches will be very, very excited to
Tony Robbins would do it straight away. Yeah. So.
Yeah, and I mean, if you send a text reminder, or if you agree on when to meet next, and it sounds like that's not a very complex conversation. I mean, there's lots of people who are going to do that. I would want to be very clear when it's me and when it's the AI, but yes. I think it's inevitable that coaches will pretend to be the AI, or the vice versa.
But that's where we're going to reach the ethics side. No, so that's the big point about like data transparency itself. I mean, like it's also about coaching ethics. Yeah, not pretending to be someone you're not. Yeah. You as a human being pretending to be the AI, or the other way around. Maybe one day, but not such a like.
Look at how much knowledge I have. Is there another major application area of how coaches can utilize AI or chatbots? I mean, part of what I was thinking is outsourcing, for example, a strength assessment or
any kind of assessment.
Yeah.
Can be done easily. Yeah, you don't have to do it just. I mean, most of the coaches now send out, like these forms that you have to fill in, and then it's done, and then you just go through it with your client. But
it's done conversationally. So instead of me sending you a link to a questionnaire, which feels quite dry,
have you ever tried to fill in 250
questions? Yeah, many times.
What was it?
You got a research background, right?
Yes. And I'm like, oh, no, thank you. I mean, like after the 30th question, I mean, like I don't really fill it in properly anymore because I get very bored. So I don't know if all these profiles that they did from me during my lifetime are actually accurate because I was mainly bored after usually question 30. Yeah. So.
Yeah. But then also the feedback, right? You get the results and then you have a question where you just like, there's a lot of questions that you would ask every single session, right? What surprised you? What did you expect? What was the experience like? What did you learn from this? I mean, there's so many questions that the AI can just take you through a process, and then you get a summary or you get a transcript, and then you continue with your human coach. I mean, that's so helpful, and it's gonna drop the cost a lot.
Yeah, I mean, like I think that's my personal belief, but I think 20 to 30% of the coaching conversations that you can have nowadays with an AI are actually already sufficient for people to move on. And I think that, and for the others, it actually triggers the need of actually talking to a human coach. Yeah, so it will satisfy a lot more people, but on the other hand, it will also create a lot more business for coaches that are out there, for human coaches.
Right.
Yeah? So we don't know where this is going to end up with AI developing further. But for the moment being where we're at, I think this is a very good combination to use this kind of like as like a first self-reflection for the client, and then actually get the client, like to book more coaching sessions with a coach or explore more in regards to that. And it's a great starting point.
I'm picturing right now large buildings full of cubicles with coaches inside. So the AI starts the process, and then if it gets too complex, it's like, oh, let me connect you to a human coach. And
I mean that's why all the coaching platforms are set out now to build stuff like that, because they need to be able to scale their coaching. Yeah. They can't scale coaching. I always said that in the beginning when they first established, like, it was just a little bit before Corona hit. So when they kind of like launched that, it's not scalable, but with an AI coach in the picture, it would be scalable. So finally they've come to their senses and are now releasing their first AI coaches. And this is, let's say, something that I have been waiting for a longer time already. So.
Yeah. Oh, exciting. So let's talk about ethics then, because I do think there's a lot of concerns.
Oh, yeah.
Lately, I've been trying to see this a lot more positively. I went through a pretty dark phase where I thought, okay, well, this could go really badly just in general. I know you said general artificial intelligence is far away. I read in an article that you said about 2030 to 2060, the estimates have been, it's 10, 20 years away for like 10, 20 years, it seems.
Yeah, but I think we're getting closer now.
Yeah. And
it's not that far away, but
exponential development, right? So, I mean, that's scary on a much bigger picture in terms of coexistence and how excited am I about ants. And if ants are in my house, ants are gone, So, but let's talk about it in the context of coaching. And I'm trying to get more excited about it and see the possibilities, but there are a lot of ethical concerns here as well. Yes. You mentioned data protection already. Maybe let's start with that, and maybe you can talk us through a couple of the concerns that are on the table, and possibly how this is being dealt with, if it can be.
I mean, we're here in Europe, we are dealing with GDPR. So we have like, let's say, one of the higher standard when it comes to data protection and what kind of data we are allowed to actually use, and to learn from. And I think
can you just frame the problem? Because I mean, part of the problem, as I understand it, is we need to feed any chatbot or any AI that sits into our coaching sessions so that we train. We need to feed them potentially very confidential data.
mean, the question is, do we need to feed it like privacy prone data or not? But yes, we need to feed it with data sets, otherwise it's not going to learn. So the question is just how are we going to like collect these data sets? Are people aware of that their conversations are actually part of a training data set? And here we are not allowed to use any data sets without the consent of the actual client user of the system. So we have to get their permission to actually do that. And they have to be fully aware of how we're going to use these data sets, and what's going to happen with these data sets. And they can actually withdraw their consent to use these data sets. And that's the difficult part, because if we would use data sets from a client to train an AI, and then they would withdraw the consent, we have already trained. So that's a very ethical issue. We're talking AI ethics here now. So like, what kind of like data are we using to train it? So we have to really carefully collect the data sets with the consent of the user to actually, we're talking Europe here. So US is a totally different picture. And we have to always, now we're talking coaching ethics, help our clients to understand what's happening with that conversation. Because I mean, like, one of the big things in coaching is that conversation between me and the client stays with me and the client. So the moment I use a coaching platform, the moment I use coaching chatbots, I give away that kind of, or like I actually enter my data into another system, or they record something, or the session is going to be done via that platform. So that's also an issue. So what are they then doing with that? So as a coach, you have actually a lot of responsibility if you want to act ethical. So you have to be aware of what is, like, if I use even Zoom, we're recording here on Zoom today. What's Zoom doing with these data? When I say something here in Zoom, I mean, like, this is going to be stored on servers in the US. So I mean, like, all that stuff, is not Europe based. So it was a big concern in the beginning of the Corona times that coaches were just not aware of what they're actually doing and which platforms they were using. And it's the same like with AI, like where does all this stuff come from? And that's an ethical discussion first on the AI side, like, on its AI ethics. And we have coaching ethics of always keeping the conversation between me and the client private. Or I need the client's consent to actually talk to a superior or to somebody else, or save that data somewhere. Even if I take notes, I had clients in the past that didn't even want me to take any notes, and that's fine. So how do you do that now in an online system? So there are a lot of discussions that we actually have to raise and have to lead. And that's where, for me, all the coaching associations need to come in, which they're currently not, which I find very concerning, to be honest. That's a discussion we need to lead, with now also AI coming into that picture.
I mean, that expands the contracting phase quite a lot. And when somebody approaches you, especially if you were to use AI in some way before you had a consultation, or, I mean, there will need to be an agreement that I'm contacting a coach who's partnering with AI. And
you need to be aware of it as a client. I mean, like, many clients are totally fine with it. Like, many people are fine using WhatsApp, even though everybody knows about the issues that WhatsApp has in regards to data protection. But people use it, but they know it. And if you use an AI, knowing what's happening in the background, it's your decision. You hopefully we're all adults and all able to make our own well-educated decisions, but therefore we need to know about this and need to learn about this.
First thing you need to know about me, I'm a coach who uses a mobile phone. I'm using a smartphone, so I just need you to be aware of it. Maybe it's going to be like that in the future, that it's just going to become normal and people just know about it. But you mentioned AI hallucinating, and that seems to be a big ethical concern, especially, I mean, depending on what the oversight of a human partnering with the AI is. Are we going to read every single transcript? that an AI might have with our client as part of a feedback session, for example?
No, but you have to inform the client. Like, we inform our users now that we are actually working with this language model, and that this language model is known to sometimes hallucinate, like they call it, or make up things. So if they feel any disturbances or whatever, they can just like stop the conversation at any point, or just ignore it, or whatever they then feel doing. So they're aware of this fact, and they can still decide if they want to continue.
Yeah, but you may not notice, right? I mean, if somebody has a PhD in psychology or not, is not necessarily information I'm going to double check, because it sounds so confident.
That's true. But I mean, like in a coaching setting, we don't usually ask if that person has a PhD in something.
Yeah, of course.
But it can hallucinate certain things in the conversation, where it, for example, picks up on, let's say, the coachee's intent, and kind of like rephrases that, and maybe it gets it wrong, or it adds something that the user didn't say, for example. From a coaching ethics perspective, this is kind of like overstepping. So doing like certain interpretations and things like that. But I'm not saying that normal coaches are not doing it, but if the AI does it, it's even worse. But people just need to be aware that this can happen, so they know how to deal with it. I mean, like with everything else with technology, you just have to be aware on how it works, and know about the downsides, like talking about WhatsApp and like mobbing and in schools, and all that. You just have to be aware what the possibilities are that technology brings with it.
Yeah. What else are you concerned about, or are people concerned about in the context of coaching in there?
I think there are probably a lot more concerns than I'm aware of, because I'm more deep into this subject. Is there anything that you can think of on an ethical side, coaching wise?
Well, I wonder what keeps you up at night.
Me?
If anything, maybe you sleep like a baby.
No.
Maybe you sleep like a baby and you wake up every 3 hours and you cry.
What keeps me up at night is actually that this, let's say, the latest development in technology, let's say the last half year, what keeps me really up is like, I have no idea where this is going to go. I mean, like, I have a clue, but I don't really know for sure. And in the speed it's taking at the moment is actually worrying me a bit, in regards of that I don't know how fast we can keep up. I mean, I know I can keep up with it, but the coaching industry is not known of being very fast moving in regards to technology. And that's what worries me, because I believe that coaching is such an essential way of, I think everybody should know how to use this, and it should be, like something that every human being should actually know, like how to do or how to make use of that. And with coaches not being able to keep up with current technology, that worries me. That's why I'm probably sometimes very pushy at the moment of like, I do a webinar now every week to talk about ChatGPT, and like because that's what people know most about, and what it will like do for the future of coaching, or how it will impact the future of coaching, because I want people to be aware of it. And kind of like partner with this new technology, because I see the danger of the technology actually taking over, not the technology, let's say tech innovators in every way that are out there in the market at the moment, taking over the role of the coaches at a certain point. And I think that coaches, and there are definitely coaching associations and the whole coaching industry, should have a say in that, and should be able to influence this, and should actually partner in developing a good path and way of creating AI coaching. But the way it is at the moment, they're just so far behind that I'm really worried. That what keeps me sometimes up at night.
Yeah, and I mean, when I think about that, I mean, I already got a bit dizzy just looking into what's out there, and then what was out there 3 months ago, and now it's like maybe not so relevant anymore, or just really old. Like, for example, I was tempted for a moment to ask you, well, what are some practical prompts that you can ask ChatGPT? But now ChatGPT 4 got released not too long ago. 5 is coming in a couple of months. So, I mean, by the time that people listening to this, it might just not be relevant anymore. And I think that's the kind of issue that a lot of coaches have. It's like, well, if I educate myself about how to work with an AI now, all of that might be irrelevant just like 4 months from now, because a new model would come out, and all of those prompts that I've learned about how to get best coached by ChatGPT, they're not going to be relevant anymore because we're just beyond that now.
Yeah, but that's where like technology, like combinations of technology and coaching, like what we do, are coming in, because we're working with this all the time. So if coaches use something like us or somebody else, yeah, that actually develops stuff for them, they don't have to learn the prompts.
Right.
I mean, like prompt engineering, I can tell you, is now a full-time job. Yeah,
right.
I'm certain days a week, I'm not doing anything else. Yeah, so and you can't expect a coach to do that, but you can expect a coach to know how to use these tools that will be out in the market, and apply them for their coaching purposes. They don't need to learn the prompting and the technology behind it, but they need to know how to utilize it best in their coaching process with their clients, to enhance their connection with the client.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. So it's a bit like early computers. We don't need to speak MS-DOS commands anymore, because people are developing operating systems that take care of all the prompting. And, ultimately we'll just be using some sort of chat AI or AI coach operating system.
Yeah, I can't write Python code, but I can get ChatGPT to write the Python code by actually prompting it in a good way. But but therefore I have developers, in my company, and they actually do all that in the background, and we work together. And like we work together, the coach needs to work together with the software, with the technology that's out there, to get the best and do the best for their clients.
Yeah, great. Hey, I have an eye on the time. I wonder, one question I wanted to ask is what's out there at the moment or in the near future that coaches should pay attention to? I know you mentioned a couple of language models, you mentioned a couple of companies. I mean, Evoch is obviously one of them, but what else should people pay attention to if they wanted to stay up to date?
God, there's so much out there. I would suggest, as a first step, try to create your own content with something like ChatGPT, just to see the power and play around with it and better understand what's actually happening out there. And what I personally find super exciting in regards to creating digital AI coaches are actually that you can now get your avatars that speak like a human being, that the new language models also allow to like constantly like to translate in like any like language back and forth, and like simultaneously, so you can enter something in German and it speaks back to you in English or in Arabic or whatever. So this is going to come at a certain point, which is like super interesting, so that language is not a barrier anymore, and I think that's super exciting. And also like the creation of these kind of like human-like avatars that hopefully still look a little bit like an avatar, but gave me my Star Trek moments where I'm kind of like, oh, this is so cool. I love Star Trek. So finally, have this AI talking to you, and it looks like a human being, and you can just like chat, there are already some really good, let's say, explorations out there on how to do it. And I think we're going to launch something also very soon on that you have as human avatar that can talk back to you.
You did say you love data.
It's not going to look like data, I think. But maybe I'm going to create one for me. Like I'm like, you see, a Master Yoda and Data. So I like I like Data, and I like Master Yoda as the mentor. Yeah, so which is for me my coach.
There's a fantastic scene at the end of I think the first season of Picard where Data he visits Data, and Data is giving the speech about the importance of death.
Yeah, I'm now in the current series where they have created Data, recreated Data in his actual age now, and as an AI, and implemented other personality into him. So yeah, this is going to be very interesting. So that these digital coaches can actually integrate so many different things. Then.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You mentioned a webinar you do weekly. Where do people go to kind of stay in touch with you on that?
I mean, you can all find me on LinkedIn. Rebecca Rutschmann is very unique. I think even if you Google it, you will only find one. So it's a good combination, I learned. And you'll find me on LinkedIn. And on our Evoke site, you will find all the webinars listed. We do run a weekly webinar now at the moment, and I think we will continue doing that. The more the technology advances on educating people on what's happening and what's there to come. And
yeah, great. Any message you want to send to coaches out there listening to this, watching this?
My message would just be stay in your coaching mindset and be curious and open and embrace what's happening, and try to learn it for the sake of your clients, and work with it to get the best out of it, for your connection with the clients.
Great. Rebecca, we could talk about this for many more hours.
Probably.
I do have many more questions. I hope we can talk again maybe in a couple of months when everything's going to be different.
We need to do an update then, probably.
Yeah. So for now, let me just say thank you very much for making time. Have fun with Amy from Coach Up.
Oh yeah. No, I'm really happy they're doing it, so it's good.
Good. Well, best of luck for everything. Keep doing what you do. It's really important, and I totally agree. This is there, and it's going to grow. And I don't think we'll be able to imagine life without it just a couple of years from now, just like we have phones or calendars now that are digital. So I appreciate your work. Thank you for making time, and see you around.
Yeah, see you. Thanks.
Thanks for listening. We hope you enjoyed the episode. To watch these episodes on video, make sure you also check out youtube.com/animascoaching. See you back here soon.